The Jews were complaining to each other about Jesus because he had said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." "Surely this is Jesus, son of Joseph," they said. "We know his father and mother. How can he say, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Jesus said in reply, "Stop complaining to each other. No one can come to me unless he is drawn by the Father who sent me, and I will raise him up on the last day. It's written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. And to hear the teaching of the Father and to learn from it is to come to me. Not that anybody has seen the Father except the one who comes from God. He has seen the Father. I tell you most solemnly, everybody who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate manna in the desert and they are dead. But this is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that a man may eat it and not die. I am the living bread which has come down from heaven. Anyone who eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I shall give is my flesh for the life of the world." A couple of years ago I went on holiday with a few friends. We booked into a little hotel in the middle of nowhere. It seemed to suit our needs down the ground. Everything was lovely, till we went to order dinner the first night. We found a table in a small restaurant and we looked at the menu and we ordered a few drinks. They had some fine real ale, so that started the evening well. The menu looked good. Mouths were salivating. Mine particularly at the thought of scallops with black pudding to start. Sure enough, the waiter came and took our order, and all was well for a few minutes. Then he came back and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, there's no scallops." Okay, fair enough. I ordered something else, and he returned to say, "That wasn't on the menu either." Apologized profusely, and I settled on something else. Later, the girls ordered a bottle of wine to go with their meal. That wasn't available. Well, it was, but it wasn't chilled. So they recommended something else, simply because it was chilled and available. Main course followed the same pattern as the starters. Half the things we ordered weren't available, and orders were taken to the kitchen. First time the waiter came back to apologize. The second time the chef came out himself to apologize and told us what was on the menu and what he recommended. And that was okay too. By the time we got to dessert, we didn't get our hopes up. And this time, the owner herself was sent. The chef and the waiter were too embarrassed to come back and report that something else wasn't available. So she came herself and apologized. But you know what? It was one of the most enjoyable meals, and certainly one of the most memorable meals I think I've had. We had a wonderful time that evening. We took it in the right spirit. I mean, what's the point in getting angry? You just add to the suffering of the waiter and the chef. They felt bad enough having to apologize all the time. Why make them feel worse? And after all, the evening wasn't totally about food. It wasn't primarily about food, although we were hungry after a day's traveling and holidaying and walking. But it wasn't really about the food. There was so much more going on that evening than food. It was principally about company. The meal was an opportunity for us to spend more time together. And that's really what the evening was about. There was only one other couple in that restaurant when we were there. And they weren't quite so pleased, although they got everything they ordered as far as I know. Seemed that way anyway. But they still weren't happy. They weren't happy with our raucous behavior. We were getting into the spirit of We have made our mind up that we are going to enjoy this time together, and enjoy it we did, despite everything. They, on the other hand, thought it was too rowdy, too noisy in the restaurant, and they complained, and they asked to be moved to a different room where they could finish their meal. And so they went. You see, even for them, dinner was about more than just food. There was something of an atmosphere that they were looking for as well. It's true, isn't it? When you go to have a meal with friends or with family, the food might be an important part of that meal. But the meal itself, the occasion, is about so much more than just the food. I mean, if you're going out to meet up with friends on an evening, well, you prepare for it, don't you? You plan ahead. You talk to each other. You decide who is able to go and who might not be able to join you. Where you'll go, when you'll go. You may think about how you're going to get there, and perhaps more importantly, how you're going to get home again afterwards. What time's the last bus or train? Can you get a taxi? Is someone going to be fit enough to drive? You prepare for going out. You think about what you're going to wear, what time you need to leave, what time you want to be there. And when you gather, well, someone's got to be first and someone last, but those that arrive early, you greet each other, don't you? You say hello, you welcome each other into your company. And you maybe sit down and have a drink as you settle into that company. You chat, you catch up while you wait for the others to come and the meal itself, the meal proper, to begin. You might read the menu to whet your appetite, to get those taste buds tingling as you think of what you might eat. And then you order the food and you eat it and you enjoy the company, although the chat may die down a little while you enjoy the food. But there are other elements that contribute to the enjoyment too. Maybe the atmosphere in wherever it is that you eat. Maybe the background music adds something to it. The attitude of the people certainly does. The pace at which the meal's eaten, whether it's rushed because you've got somewhere else to go, or whether you can eat at a leisurely pace and not feel rushed and enjoy the moment a bit more. And when the meal itself is ended, well, maybe you don't just pack up and move on. Maybe you sit for a while and let the food digest and enjoy the company even longer. And when you do leave, well, there's farewells and promises that we must do this again soon. All of that to get the most out of an evening spent with friends over food, over a meal. A couple of weeks ago in the Gospel, we read of John's account of the feeding of the 5,000. And last week, Jesus challenged the crowd that were continuing to follow him, whether they were following because they'd had enough bread to eat, or because they had seen the signs, because they were looking for something more than just to have their physical hunger satisfied. And today in the Gospel, Jesus continues to distinguish between the bread that he broke and gave and the bread of life that he is offering to them. It's a distinction that we're invited to ask of ourselves as we enter into our celebration of Eucharist, whenever we enter into our celebration of Eucharist. Why are we there? And how do we prepare? How do we prepare to participate in a celebration of Eucharist so that we get the most out of it? Take out of it all that is being offered to us. If going out with friends for a meal takes preparation and planning. What preparation and planning do we give to participating, to sharing in a Eucharistic meal? How do you prepare? How do you get ready for entering into that celebration and taking something from it? Do you try and arrive early so that you have time to settle, or do you leave arriving till the last minute? And what does that say about the occasion, what it is you're entering into? That, well, what does it say? Do you greet each other when you arrive at the church as you would friends in other situations, other settings? Do you take time to settle into the company and into the occasion? What about the attitude? If attitude affects the enjoyment of a meal, surely attitude has some part to play in our experience of the Eucharist. What about the music? How does the music affect you? Do you join in with the singing? Do you like it? Does it help? And what about the readings? Do you read them beforehand in preparation so that you know what you'll hear, so that you can listen more attentively? Do you listen attentively to the readings, or do they wash over you? And when it comes to communion, is that really what you're there for? The food? Or are you there for more than just that? If a meal with friends is about so much more than just the food that you share, is the same true of your participation in Eucharist? Is that too about much more than the foods that we are offered and receive? And when the meal itself is over, do you rush away as quickly as possible? Or do you take time for farewells, for promises to return, to do the same again sometime? If our attitude and our preparation can make such a difference to the sharing of a meal with friends, how much more are we likely to take away from our celebration of Eucharist if we give thought to the preparation and the participation and do so with a good attitude?